Hello, my name is Jessica Kremensky, and I will be presenting on Catherine Beecher. Beecher had many ideas and theories that impacted education greatly. One of the first ideas that she had was women's views of moral rules. Beecher was a pioneering educator and reformer who championed women's education, especially in teaching and domestic sciences. She argued that women held a subordinate relation to men in society, but this did not diminish their importance at all. Instead, she emphasized that women's influence was a moral and spiritual exercise primarily through home and education. Beecher believed that moral education was essential to national progress and that women were uniquely suited to instill virtue and character in children. A second idea she had was domestic sphere as political power. Beecher supported a separate spheres ideology, where men governed the public and political realm, and women governed the private and moral realm. She saw this division as complementary. Women's moral leadership balanced men's political authority, creating social harmony. Though she opposed women's public activism, she believed their private influence was politically significant, especially in shaping political opinion and civic virtue. And the third idea that she had that I'm presenting is the opposition to women's suffrage. She saw suffrage as a burden, not a right. Beecher viewed voting as a civic responsibility that required engagement in political conflict in public life. Realms she believed were inappropriate for women. She argued that women were not naturally suited for the adversarial nature of politics. In her 1870s essay, An Address on Female Suffrage, Beecher argued that women's moral influence was more effective than political power. She wrote that the sacred duties of the family and the schoolroom were more vital to national well-being than voting. In her 1872 book called Woman's Profession as Mother and Educator, it further elaborated her stance, emphasizing that woman's virtue profession was to nurture, educate, and elevate society through private virtue. Beecher also impacted education greatly. The first one I'll be talking about is promoting teachers as a female profession. Beecher saw teaching as a moral mission, not just an occupation. She believed women had a special aptitude for instilling virtue, discipline, and civic value in children. Her book, A Treatise on Domestic Economy, that she wrote in 1841, argued that women's education should prepare them for both domestic and professional roles, especially teaching. Beecher emphasized moral philosophy, domestic science, and pedagogy in her curricular reforms, aligning academic content with women perceiving strengths. Her second impact on education was elevating the status of female teachers. Beecher founded the Hartford Female Seminary in 1823. It was one of the first schools to offer a rigorous and academic education. She later helped establish the Western Female Institute and supported the creation of normal schools, also called teaching training colleges, to prepare women for professional teaching roles. And finally, I'd like to talk about the advocate she had for kindergarten and early childhood learning. Beecher believed that early childhood was the most impressionable period for instilling moral values, discipline, and religious principles. Though kindergarten was originally developed by Froebel in Germany, Beecher was among the early American educators who championed its adoption in the United States. She emphasized the benefits of structured play, sensory learning, and moral instruction in early childhood settings. And finally, Beecher's support helped legitimize kindergarten as part of a formal education, especially for middle-class families. And one of the biggest critics that Beecher had was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Stanton, in contrast of Beecher, was a radical reformer who demanded equal rights for women in all spheres, political, religious, and social. She saw Beecher's views as limiting and outdated, reforming patriarchal roles that Beecher declared. Stanton's 1848 Declaration of Sentiments, presented at the Seneca Falls Convention, directly challenged the idea that women should be confined to domestic roles. Stanton criticized the cult of domesticity that Beecher championed, arguing that it kept women dependent and invisible. And finally, she believed that true empowerment required access to public life, including the ballot box, the pulpit, and the courtroom. For my own critique, and my personal, I don't really agree with, is Beecher argued that women should not vote, claiming that suffrage was a civic burden rather than a right. Beecher also opposed the Grimmick sisters' public activism against slavery, arguing that women should not speak publicly to mixed audiences or engage in political reform. And finally, what I don't agree with is her stance reflected a broader discomfort with radical social change and has been criticized as complicit with systemic injustice despite her personal oppression to slavery. Right. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation on Catherine Beecher.